Imagine yourself as a product manager at Facebook, and how do you improve Facebook groups, and how would you measure whether you were successful?
Yeah, actually, before I start, I actually like to ask, what is the time for this interview?
30 minutes.
30 minutes, okay. So the prompt is that I am a PM at Facebook and I'm being asked to improve the Facebook groups. Is that correct? Or is there a second part to this question?
First question, how would you improve Facebook groups? And second question, how would you measure whether you were successful?
Okay, how would I measure success? Okay. So just some clarifying questions so I can understand the prompt better. So are we targeting a specific audience? Are we just working with a specific geo location for this Facebook groups, or are we doing it globally?
It's up to you to define.
Okay. I asked this question because actually Facebook groups have different behaviors based on different countries. Some regions might prefer to use the feed. Some other countries might prefer to use groups as interactions for the community. So knowing the geolocation will be very important for us to dissect the prompt later. Another question that I want to ask is there a particular goal that you have in mind? Are we trying to improve the engagement for the users? Are we trying to up our daily active users, monthly active users, all of those numbers? Is there a particular goal that you have in mind?
What do you think?
I would say that we want to increase the engagement for our users.
Okay.
Because a important mission for the Facebook community is to build connections, build social connection. And that shouldn't be just be quantified by their active uses, but we should try to engage our users within this community and be able to potentially make connections between those users. So I'd say that if I were to focus on this prompt, I would be dealing with engagement for our users. Does that sound good?
Okay, the way that you measure engagement is to see how many social connections does the group do the group members make.
Yeah, that will be my primary approach. But there are other factors that I will consider is their overall satisfaction towards their Facebook experience, and also based on their purpose of using Facebook groups. Are they finding the information, like whether or not they're trying to access information and finding information that they need? I will also measure that as whether or not users are able to extract value from their Facebook experience.
Okay, interesting. How do you want to measure satisfaction and whether the users are able to get value?
Yeah, so in terms of satisfaction, I would separate that from engagement. For satisfaction, I might be considering some overall metrics. If we're talking about metrics right now, I might consider some metrics such as the Net Promoter Score, whether or not in general they would recommend this application, or maybe with a review system, how much they will rank, how much they will rate their experience at Facebook. And also other types of satisfaction can be derived from other quantities such as the DUM or MUM that DAU and also MAU that I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay. So once we have that in mind, so I would like to focus on the prompt of trying to improve the Facebook groups and basically trying to improve the engagement for our users and also improve their satisfaction throughout their experience using Facebook group. Does that sound good to you?
Okay.
Okay. So with that in mind, I'd like to take a brief moment to think about some of the assumptions and also different types of stakeholders within this prompt.
Yeah, that's good.
So one assumption that I want to make is potentially to just narrow our prompt to be targeting US market. I do know that the Facebook entire community, the entire environment is very globally based. But however, in order for us to really improve the user experience, I would like to start with a market that we're most familiar with, and also one that probably characterizes a lot of different user behaviors, so that once we are able to better understand this group, we can potentially expand across different areas of the world as well. Would you be okay with that, or should I expand that a little bit?
So which market do you want to target?
The US market.
Okay, can you maybe explain why do you want to target US market from a business point of view?
Yeah, so in terms of the strategy, I like to focus on just one region at a time, just so we can control the variables of launching this product. As for picking the US market versus other markets, we have the most active users from our US populations, and also we have the most diverse groups. A large part of this is because Facebook did start from the US market before launching into other markets. So the localizations might not be as mature for other groups, and we have the most informed. We can probably make the most informed decisions based on a market that we're most familiar with. So that's why I would like to focus on the US market.
Okay.
Okay. As for the stakeholders, I'd say that there are probably two groups that we have to look at: the Facebook organization as a business entity, and also the users. So we want to consider some factors that might affect our ability to run the entire Facebook suite of products and services. And on the other hand, we probably do want to focus on our users to see how we can tackle their pain points and improve their, once again, engagement and satisfaction while they're using the Facebook group. Does that sound good to you?
Okay.
Okay, so now that we have looked at the assumptions for our geographic geographic condition and also our stakeholders, I would like to take a moment to consider the user segmentation.
Okay.
Okay, so I have divided the users into three major buckets for those who are using Facebook groups. So for one, it's with the intent of making connections. So these might be professional communities where users will be able to join the community and be able to perhaps post a bio and then try to connect with each other. And I see this across different age groups as well, whether that is student groups who want to make new connections, and also with more professional community of professional workers who want to network. And the second group that I will categorize will be interest groups. So these interest groups, they can also potentially have a purpose of making a connection, but most of these users join with the intention of getting information about certain interests. So this might be tennis groups. This might be, or I want to say meme groups, where they can get information about or to get entertainment values from the posts that are shared based on their interests. The third group that I've come up with is business groups. So this is attached to potentially business pages where we allowed our business owners to be expressing to be able to expand their values by potentially marketing their new products. So I'd say that this really is contingent upon the business owners and really built around that brand, where the people in the groups are mainly true believers of the brands and want to stay up to date with their products and services. I've actually come up with one last bucket of users for the intention of going to events. So these event pages, these event groups potentially have lists out or have a very active post of the upcoming events and try to navigate people to these events. And these events can be self-organized within the members of this community, or it can be a formal event that is being posted and shared among this group. So after listening out these four, do you have any question that you want me to clarify on, or do you want me to pick one to narrow in?
First question, what was your first group again? I didn't follow.
So that one is connections. So
Okay.
these connection groups I found to occur perhaps in a college campus. So there are college campus groups where users who are entering in as a freshman class, they will be able to connect with each other. And this can also be relevant for professional groups where groups within an area, they want to connect. So this will be solely for or primarily for the connection purpose within between the users.
Okay.
So that will be the first group.
Mm-hmm. And the second question I have is, why do you target groups instead of users?
So I did bucket these users based on the different types of groups, but I do want to perhaps label our users or categorize our users based on the groups that they're most interested in. Perhaps they do go to different types of groups, but I would categorize them to one that they find the most value from.
So what I'm understanding is, if you target a specific group, then you're building product feature just for that kind of group, right?
So I guess that could be a tricky thing to be labeling our user segmentations based on the types of groups. But the way that I'm trying to focus our user is to really say like what type of groups do these users find the most value in. So yes, again, it might be relevant that a user will go to two different types of groups. But once we narrow into the group that they find the most value in, then we can tackle their pain point accordingly.
I don't quite understand this. So you are saying that the one user might get involved in multiple groups, but because you just want to target one or two segments from these user groups, it means that the user probably have different experiences in different groups.
I understand your concern. Would you like me to come up with another type of user segmentation, or go forward with one where I can link the users with these type of groups? I can briefly draw another type of segmentation in which we divide it up to students, professional workers, and also casually using people who are casually using these groups, and also business owners, as these four buckets are semi-correlated to the groups that I had mentioned before.
I don't really care how you do user segmentation, but I just want to know, how do you define the four groups that you just want to target? For example, like what are the metrics that you want to use to basically like segment the groups into this different categories?
So originally, when I came up with the segmentation, my thought was I want to do it by intent. What is their intent out of this user group, a Facebook group experience? And once we're able to understand their intent, of getting into this group, perhaps we can understand the behavior and find their pain points.
Okay, so how do you know the intent from the users then?
So based on the assumption that these groups have, these 4 different types of groups have a particular purpose for our users, then we will understand like what type of value they try to extract from it. For example, the one that I mentioned, the event groups, perhaps their intent is to be able to find this event and be able to attend this event. Then this is the intention, and the value that they extract is the ability to attend this event because of the Facebook group.
Yeah, but how do you know it's an event group?
So actually, these are often labeled within the name of the groups, and also the groups have guidelines as well. So group admins, a lot of them run these groups as a formal product. So even a group can be thought of as a product. It has target users, it has a purpose, and a lot of these are stated within the guidelines. And if a well-regulated group admins, they are able to basically to enforce these rules, then these Facebook groups will be able to go according to the intent of the group.
Got you. So basically, you want to get this information from the group admins. You want to let the group admins try to help you to categorize their groups into one of the categories. And also you want to maybe identify the information from the group name as well.
Yes, that's potentially one way for us to categorize these groups.
What are the other ways?
So the way that you mentioned is just for our group admins to be able to help us to separate these groups into their purpose. Then the other way would be potentially for the Facebook company to be developing an algorithm to based on the type of activities that show up within these groups, we can categorize them ourselves.
Okay.
For example, a very quick example of how to implement that is if we see that there is primarily events that are being posted on this Facebook group, then we can label it as an event group.
Okay.
Yeah, so with that in mind, having listed these 4 different types of groups, is there a particular one that you want me to focus on?
It's up to you.
Okay, so I would say that I would like to focus on the events type of groups, and potentially with a slight mix of the connection group as well. So why that is because the mission of Facebook is to be able to connect our people. And a lot of times what we want to do with our products is to not only show our profiles to each other, to our users, but also help them foster that connection through potentially their interests. And also, I'd say that one good way for us to do that is through events. For people who are going to the same events, they might already have a implicit connection. So then maybe focusing on these type of groups, we can better foster the mission of Facebook. Does that sound good?
Okay. Are there any other reasons why you choose event groups?
So for event groups, I'd say that this is probably one that we can measure quite directly, or it will be more easier for us to measure the success of this process. As part of the prompt, we do want to measure the success of the improvement of the user of the Facebook group product. So one way for us to, now I'm just jumping ahead, one way for us to think about that success metrics is potentially thinking about the number of events that are created or that have been promoted and encourage our users to attend. And again, along that side, maybe the number of connections are being made because of these events. So that's why I'd say that with that in mind, it'd probably be reasonable to focus on those 2.
Okay.
All right. So let me take a brief moment to think about the pain points. Okay, so I've thought of three primary pain points for users within the events groups. One is that they're not able to find the proper event group. They might be looking for a ticket to a concert where they also want to find friends. They want to make new friends who are also going to the same concert. Or they might be looking for a local event and they want to see if they're able to attend these local events arranged by a small group of people. The second pain point is that these event groups does not necessarily mean connection. As we tie this problem back to the mission of Facebook, which is to create connections between our users. A lot of times, yes, we might be able to display the event to the same type of concert, and it will just be used as an advertisement for our event promoters, but it doesn't necessarily create the connection values between our users. So this can be a pain point for those who also want to find others attending the same event, sharing the same interests. The last pain point that I've come up with is some of these events that I've just mentioned, they might be local events arranged by a small group of people with another Facebook group, Facebook user. So a issue that comes with it is they find it illegitimate. They find it unsafe to attend these events because it's arranged by basically a stranger. So that can be potentially a pain point for our users wanting to attend events, but fearing that there is no security to doing so. So now that I have outlined the three pain points, do you have any questions regarding any of them, or do you want me to dive deeper into any?
Maybe just choose one and dive deeper. I just want to remind you that you only have 7 minutes left. So
Okay, sure. Then I'd say for now, I would like to go with the local events. The second pain point, which is actually the third pain point, in which these Facebook users are able to find the events listed on the page, but they find it unsafe to attend these events. The reason being is that that can be a very important transition, a very important segue for Facebook to not only be a online community, but also be a local community builder to be promoting these events, foster connections within a local space. So with that in mind, I would like to focus on the local events.
Okay.
So now let me take a brief moment to think about the solutions. Okay, so the three ideas I've come up with is first, we create Facebook local spaces. So this can be similar to what Amazon has with the Amazon Entrepreneurial Centers, in which users can be able to attend to go into these workspaces and be able to connect. But for these Facebook local spaces, we allowed our group members to be able to book our location and use that location for their events hosting. And because this is a space owned by Facebook, we might add a layer of security with potentially cameras or some type of login system so that we can ensure a sense of safety for our attendees. There might be other concerns when we talk about the camera system or just the cost of bringing in local presence, bring Facebook's local presence. But I think that this can be a potential way for us to foster connections and also build better Facebook groups. The second solution that I've come up with is verification for our event creators on Facebook. As I mentioned, what we're focusing on right now is the events that are created by our independent Facebook user. And if a user find the event host to be not trustworthy, they might be discouraged from going to this event. So if we create a verification process, potentially with a check of their ID, then this can, and then it can create, give them a label. It can give them a verified label so that our users will be more comfortable to attending these events. The third solution that I've come up with is having a peer-to-peer tracking system to these frequent event creators. So this, I am really thinking about the frequent event creators in which within the same page, within the same Facebook group, they might be creating events periodically. And if we allowed our users who have attended the event to give them a rating, to give them a review of how well they've hosted the event, then this can also create a trust system between our users. So having listed those three, do you have any questions regarding any of those? Would you like me to go deeper into any one in particular?
Which one do you think is the most promising one?
Okay, so with those three in mind, some evaluations that I have is one, tying back to our purpose. How well does it create engagement between our users, particularly in our Facebook groups? And second is their satisfaction with this. And also another metric that I potentially want to talk about, or another criteria I want to think about, is the impact. How impactful is this type of product and service to our users? And actually, lastly, I would like to evaluate based on the cost to make this happen. So with all that in mind, I think that we can focus on creating a track record for our event creators to start with. The reason being is users who have we see this often with other platforms and services, such as Yelp. We find a business to be trustworthy when they have a high rating, when a lot of people have reviewed them. And this trust system can be translated into our Facebook groups. And since we already have a profile system within the Facebook services, it would be pretty easy for us to integrate an additional layer of profile just for event planning. And then for the implementations, since this can be relatively easy, once we have made this happen, we can potentially look towards the other two solutions if we have the engineering or marketing capabilities.
Okay.
Yeah, does that sound good to you? Do you want me to elaborate on that solution?
So basically, you want to gather reviews for rating from the customers and like using that information as a tracking system.
Right. So rating system, essentially a rating system for our, actually, I mentioned that we want to create a rating system for our event hosts, but also we can create a rating system for our Facebook groups, Facebook event groups as well. So as one is navigating through the search bar, one to join an event group, the only metric that they have right now is the number of people in this group. This might not be the most reliable for them, as there is a sense of bias. More people will tend to join these groups, so these groups will just get larger and larger. But there is no inherent way to review these groups. So if we were to add the review system to these groups, can also be beneficial to the new members thinking about whether or not this event group in general is trustworthy.
Okay.
So I would say that overall, having a rating system for our event host and also the groups will be able to help the engagement aspect of the event groups.
You have anything to add?
So that's with the solution. I can touch briefly on the metrics for this prompt, as this is part of the second question.
Yeah.
Some of the more important aspect that I want to track is whether or not, actually give me a brief moment to come up with some decent tracking metrics.
Okay.
So three metrics that I've come up with is the total number of use for this rating system. Say we have implemented this feature into our US market, the US Facebook service. We want to track the number of use for this rating system in general. Are our users who have attended the event giving a rating for our hosts and also for the page in general? And the second metric that I want to track is event attendees. Since the user group that we have targeted is an event-oriented Facebook group, we do want to encourage event attendance. So by tracking event attendees, which is already built into Facebook events, those who have clicked going to this event, then we are able to see whether or not this service actually improves the event attendance. And one last metric is just the general active users in these groups. So we have already mentioned some maybe two potential ways for us to categorize these event groups. Once we start tracking these event groups, we want to see the activity, how active these groups are, and see whether or not this feature has any influence on the active users and activities on these groups. Yeah. Do you have any questions regarding those metrics?
No questions. Do you have anything to add right now?
So no, but I can basically wrap up our case today. We started off with the prompt of improving the experience for the Facebook groups and also be able to measure the success. We have identified that we want to focus on the engagement and satisfactions for our users. And we have looked into potentially the event groups for our users to be tackling first. And we've identified that potentially they find the event hosts to be illegitimate. So we've come up with several solutions, but we have narrowed into the one where we create a rating system for our hosts and also for the groups. And hopefully by tracking the number of use for this system and also the event attendees, we'll be able to see after the launch whether or not we have achieved the goal.
What do you think?
So I think the biggest part where I tripped up is this user segmentation. That's for sure. I thought I didn't think about the logical fallacy of grouping or segmenting the Facebook groups instead of the users. There is a potential issue of users just have their users who are part of all types of groups. And it would not be very effective to be segmenting by the groups. I think I personally liked my overall structure. I can probably spend a little bit more time on the solution and metrics. And this is actually my first time doing this without sharing my screen. So hopefully it also went smoothly as well.
Yeah, I think you have a very great understanding of your answer. For my feedback, something that you did pretty well, your communication. I really like how you communicate with your interviewer. You make the overall interview experience pretty nice. You didn't let the interviewer wait for too long. How you communicate, your answer is pretty structured and organized. And I know you structured it pretty well. So if I really lost you, I will ask you questions. So that's totally fine. Interviewers probably are multitasking at the same time. So they will ask questions. No need to panic about that.
Okay.
And I also like the fact that you go from the mission every time when you make a strategic decision. It is very appreciated by interviewers from Facebook. They really want to go from the mission and analyze their business strategy first, and then decide what product direction they want to go for. So these are the things that I really like about your answer. Some of the potential improvements. First, I encourage you to use the exact words for Facebook mission. So
Okay.
you got to recite it basically.
Okay.
What is Facebook mission? To connect people together and build community. So you have to, if you want to mention Facebook mission, you have to be the exact words. And second, when I asked you, how do you measure engagement, right? How do you describe the engagement? It is only building social connections. Do you have any other stuff? First, you mentioned like satisfaction is also something that you want to measure. First, it is more qualitative than quantitative, right? You could have mentioned a lot of other metrics as well. And I don't think you have a clear structure of how you brainstorm those metrics. So when it comes to talking about metrics, you want to tell the interviewer how you streamline the metrics that you were talking about. First, you probably want to talk about maybe at the top of the funnel, I want to see the number of people joining a group, right? Or from the user's perspective, how many groups they join, right? And second, you want to see maybe the active users in the group per day. By active users, you mean maybe people sending messages, people reacting messages, people making connections, right? So this is like the mid of the funnel. You want to see the engagement within the group. And the third one, which is the final reason why you want Facebook groups, is to encourage them to make connections within the group, right? So you probably want to measure the number of connections to make through this group. So you got to tell the interviewer how you think about these metrics and what is the framework you use to come up with these metrics. And when it comes to the metric itself, you want to make it very clear. What do I mean by very clear? You should see me as a data scientist. You tell me how to calculate this number, and I can give you a number right now. Okay, so you cannot tell me maybe what do you say for your metrics at the end of your answer? You want to say like the usage of this feature. As a data scientist, I'm pretty confused, right? What do you mean by usage? Right, is the number of users clicking into this function, or the number of users maybe completing the whole journey, or the number of users maybe even come back or have a active session on this feature, right? I'm pretty confused. You got to tell me how to calculate that metric. And and also the metric question I add at the beginning of your answer is a very generic question, right? But for some of the interviewer, they probably want to, these two questions in the prompt are very ambiguous. Probably the interviewer wants to ask you how do you define success for the feature that you are trying to build. Or the user or the interviewer probably just want to ask you how do you define the success of Facebook groups. So be aware, some of the interviewer probably want to put metrics at the beginning of your answer. So you probably want to clarify it. Do you want to ask me how do I define success for Facebook groups? And I can go with that. And in that case, you don't talk about the metrics in a very general way, while the interviewer expects you to be more specific. And okay, I think you spend some time on talking about stakeholders. Well, as an interviewer, I don't know why you mentioned that. I do see the value of you mentioning the stakeholders. For example, you want to see Facebook as Facebook platform, or entity as in the other functions within Facebook, or the users as in the end users. You probably want to if you really mention the stakeholders, you want to make the value of it, right? Probably want to say, why do I want to mention entities? Because Facebook is an ecosystem, right? I don't want to just grow Facebook groups for the sake of growing Facebook groups. I want users to find value within it, and eventually maybe increase the weekly app user or the user stickiness on Facebook platform, right? So you got to tell the interviewer why you spend time on mentioning stakeholders.
I think that's very valid, actually. I mentioned the stakeholder of the Facebook corporation is because, like you mentioned, it is an ecosystem more than just building one feature. But I kind of like lost track and never like tied it back. So
yeah, so for platforms like Facebook or LinkedIn, the interviewer really appreciate you being an ecosystem thinker. So they probably like LinkedIn, right? We even have a checkbox whether you are an ecosystem thinker. So you got to tell the interviewer, I am, right? So that's why I mentioned this, because we're an ecosystem and I'm thinking about that. And next point, when I ask follow-up questions like, how do you define different groups, right? I don't really mind you do user segments to maybe have different categories for the groups. I don't really mind, right? I don't really mind like whether the users are in different groups at the same time. I don't mind that. But the question I have is, how do you define different groups? Let's say if you want to choose business groups, right? What metrics do you use to know that it is a business group? How can you distinguish the groups from other, like the business groups from all the other groups, right? You have to tell me maybe, for example, like the final answer you gave me, right? Like you probably want to look at the group name. You probably want to get information from group admin. You probably want to have an algorithm to basically see what are the activities showing up. I'd expect this answer from the beginning, okay? Facebook interviewer asks you a question, you got to think you are data-driven. What are the metrics you want to use to identify these groups? Data is the first thing you need to think about.
So regarding that, I definitely was, I panicked a little bit because it was a question that you asked me, like that was not expected. So I think the most part was I misunderstood the question. I thought you were basically disvalidating the way that I structured the way that I segmented the users. So that's why I kind of like didn't quite answer the question that you were looking for.
When the interviewer asks you a follow-up question, never be panicked. This is very, very important. As a product manager, confidence is very important. So like of all the experiments I run at LinkedIn, right? Not all the experiments are successful. No product managers can make sure that all their experiments are successful. But when you do the experiments, you got to persuade the others, your cross-functional partners, to do the experiment, to give you the resource to experiment with that. And that needs confidence. That needs your logic, that needs data support, and that needs confidence as well. They will never build a feature for inconfident product manager because you are even not confident about your own feature. So when an interviewer come up with a question, really think about why he or she is asking this question and whether there's something you need to change, whether they just want to give you an opportunity to like maybe talk more. What are the things that they really feel confused about? And then try to answer their questions. Make it more like a conversation. Never panic. You're an entry-level product manager, right? Like the interviewer might be more senior to you. So you might want to learn from them why they are asking this question and what can you learn from the question?
Actually, I think that's very valid. Something that probably could have was asking clarifying question on your question, or maybe potentially asking like just saying like do you think that the way that I have bucketed my users, like the users, is invalid? So that I will understand like what the issue is instead of just like trying to justify the way that I segmented the users.
Yeah, that would work. And also another thing that I didn't see your data driven is the way that you prioritize your the market that you want to target and the group that you want to target. So for example, when you want to target US market first, you talk about that you are more familiar with this market and you want probably, if this feature is successful in the US market, you want to expand it to other areas. It's not quantified, right? You got to tell me maybe like your final answer, maybe total addressable market, or like the user adoption on Facebook groups, or like whether this maybe like the lessons we learned from the US market is expandable to other markets as well, right? Because from my understanding, where like if you look at the strategy, the maybe annual strategy for Facebook from the F8 conference, what they're trying to focus right now is not only the US market, right? They're putting more focus on the Indian market and African market. So as a product manager at Facebook, I will be very confused, like why don't you want to put more resources on the market that the leadership really care about? So if you have really great reasons to support your idea, name all those reasons, right? Be quantified, as quantified as possible. And the same thing happened when you choose event group. You talk about event group is a very great scenario to connect people together, right? But maybe you want to say I'm not a product manager at Facebook right now, but so I don't have the exact data to support my idea, but I do want to check in maybe the number of event groups versus the other groups, maybe the engagement in the event group versus the other groups, whether there is a problem in event groups, and also considering the environment, right now, right? Like COVID is ending and people are getting out again. It's not like totally quarantine. So we probably want to promote event group so that users can have more, can contribute more sessions for WOW on Facebook events, on Facebook platform.
Okay.
And I don't really mind you do user segments by groups, but usually if I answer this question and do user segments, I will definitely talk about group admins, active group members, and infrequent group members, right? So like within the group, what are the functions or what are the roles people are playing? But it's just an idea. And I know you don't have enough time to talk about your pain point and solutions. That's probably why you just like jump into pain point and solutions pretty quick and try to cover all the stuff and metrics as well. But you probably do want to think about like maybe is unsafe the only reason why users don't go to offline events, right? Like you probably want to be more empathetic and to understand what is the real reason behind not showing up or not attending offline events, right? Probably the users have different like levels of cautiousness when it comes to COVID, right? Whether you are vaccinated, whether I'm vaccinated, right? And whether you are going to attend the events with a mask, or like maybe the users are not sure about the other person's personality, right? I can stalk your Facebook profile, but probably you don't update that much. So I don't know what kind of person I am hanging out with. And maybe like they have different goals for attending the offline events. Some of them just want to make friends and some of them just want a company, right? And you probably want to dive deeper. Unsafe is not the only reason. And if you dive deeper and show your user empathy, it is a very, this is a factor that the Facebook interviewers very appreciate.
Okay.
And also because you don't have enough time, so you didn't talk about the risks coming from the solutions. If you're gathering reviews or ratings for event hosts, are they going to have like abuse for this feature, right? What if like there are like number of users, there may be one user just like putting bad reviews for every event host? Is it a possibility how you are going to make this platform more trustworthy? How do you make the rating or reviews more trustworthy for the users, right? Maybe like you want to tackle the risk as well. And also you mentioned trustworthy a lot of times, which is great because Facebook is focusing on building a trustworthy platform as well. But you probably want to talk about how you know about that, right? Maybe from the recent Facebook strategy trend from F8 conference, you see like Facebook is paying more attention on privacy and the overall trustworthy of the platform. So that's why you want to focus on trustworthy. I feel like this point is coming from nowhere. from your answer. So you probably want to have something to leverage.
Okay.
And your solution is not visualized enough. That's because you don't have enough time. So usually you want to spend half of your time on pinpoint a solution. So maybe like when you talk about solution, for example, you talk about your third solution to have a peer-to-peer tracking system. You probably want to talk about like where is the entry point of the tracking system, right? And how can the users add their reviews or rating? How can the mean maybe added or like add follow-up? You want to talk about the details of the feature.
I think definitely one of the biggest struggles that I have is managing the time for the interview. I do have a few ideas in mind. If I were to expand on any of those solutions or pain points, then I am afraid that it will cut into time for other stuff. So like from this case specifically, is there a part that you say just I should probably like speed up and like shorten?
Yeah, I think it's definitely not that necessary for you to mention stakeholders.
Okay.
And also, I feel like the way that you talk about, targeting U.S. market or like user segments is a little bit ambiguous. So that's why I add a lot of like follow-up question, which also take a bunch of your time as well. So I think as you get more proficient in answering these questions, you can come up with a more like maybe typical framework in terms of how you want to target the strategy point, the strategy part of your answer. So I think you spend too much time in at the beginning.
Okay.
The last feedback I have is also about metrics. The way that you talk about the metrics of how you want to measure this, the success of this feature is a little bit too messy. Talk about the usage, which I don't know how to calculate, right? Event attendees, I don't know what time frame you're looking at, right? Are you looking at per day or per week? This is not something I could calculate. So try to be more specific when you talk about metrics.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for all of that feedback. I've actually jotted down all of them. So it actually included almost like a page of feedback, and I found all of them to be very useful. So yeah, thank you so much for your time.
No worries.